Okay. Welcome, everyone. This is our Tuesday morning coffee chat or afternoon on the East Coast. We vote for women's bodily autonomy, and we have some great speakers today. This is a part of the Why Do You Vote Social Action Campaign, which is a nonprofit, nonpartisan campaign. So everything that we are presenting today is an educational effort to raise awareness on what's going on across the country about women's bodily autonomy. And first, we are going to hear from Chris Melody Fields Figueredo from the Ballot Initiative Strategy Center. Welcome, Chris.
Thank you for having me. So we only have what, three Tuesdays left, 4 Tuesdays left. Um, and there's a lot to be excited about. So we have made it through the qualification process. We've made it through all the litigation, and 10 states will have reproductive freedom on the ballot. But there are 11 ballot measures and one advisory question. So where do we have it on the ballot? We have it on the ballot in Arizona, Colorado, Florida, Maryland, Missouri, Montana, Nebraska. I'm going to come back to you, Nebraska, Nevada, New York, and South Dakota. So each of these states have some type of reproductive freedom ballot measure on the ballot. Most have our constitutional amendments to protect abortions, many of them up until viability. Nebraska is one of the unique states. They not only have a proactive pro reproductive freedom, they will also face an abortion ban. And I think that's really important for people to know that this is going to be a really critical time for voter education because people are going to be confused. And it actually was very intentional to have both on the ballot to confuse Nebraska voters. And the ban appears first on the ballot, and the reproductive freedom appears on the bottom of the ballot. So if you know folks on Nebraska, this is going to be a really critical period to make sure we are educating voters to let them know the difference between ultimately whichever one gets the most votes is the one that will move forward. So both could get over 50%, but whoever has the highest vote tally will be the one that wins. Another, state that is really important for folks to be thinking about and talking about is Florida because they have to meet a high threshold. 60% of the electorate has to vote for the amendment for. So again, this is a really critical voter education period right now to make sure people are aware because they have such a high threshold. And then, some unique ones are even in states where you think, oh yeah, this is easy, like a Maryland or New York, they actually don't have these are legislatively referred ballot measures, which means voters aren't used to in those states to vote on issues, which requires a lot of voter education. So we have such a great opportunity. I feel very hopeful about being able to continue the trend that we have had of winning reproductive freedom, but it is really important for folks to read voter guides, to educate yourselves so you understand the language. What we know is if people are confused about what a vote yes or vote no means, they're going to be more likely to skip that question altogether or vote no. So these next couple of weeks are just really, really critical time for voter education.
Thanks, Chris. And I'm going to add in the chat the hot sheet. Is that the best place to find the latest voter guide stuff? And I'm also sharing in the chat a shared spreadsheet so that people can find out the latest information and links after the call. Because I know it's hard to keep track of everything and listen. And next we have Alicia Johnson from Americans United for the Separation of Church and State.
Hi. So at Americans United, we are working to make sure that all people are free to believe or not believe as we choose, and that laws cannot allow anyone to use their religious beliefs to harm others. And that very much includes bodily autonomy, that laws should not interfere with people's ability to make their own decisions about their own bodies. And I'm particularly passionate about this topic. I've been working in the reproductive freedom world since I was a student. I went to a Catholic university and got involved in activism around making sure that myself and my peers had access to the healthcare we needed, the information that we needed and deserved to be able to, make our own healthy decisions to build lives that we envision for ourselves. And so in my career, I've been working towards that vision that, ensuring people have the freedom and the resources to make our own decisions about our bodies, our families. And now at Americans United, I'm the national organizer and student network manager. And I work primarily with young people who are fighting across the country for reproductive freedom and LGBTQ rights and the rights of religious minorities and the non-religious, for public education, all these issues that are underpinned by the separation of church and state. And we're unfortunately fighting against an increasingly emboldened Christian nationalist movement that is trying to impose this one narrow set of religious beliefs on all of us. We see that in the fight for bodily autonomy. We see that in all these bans on abortion access that are explicitly or implicitly an imposition of a religious belief about abortion on everybody. We've been working, for example, in Missouri. We have a lawsuit challenging the state's abortion ban and restrictions, where lawmakers actually talked very openly about their religious beliefs when passing these laws. And in the law in Missouri wrote, quote, that the Almighty God is the author of life, and thus drove their passage of that bill. But Missouri's not alone. We're seeing this across the country that lawmakers are very willing to disregard the constitutional principle of church-state separation, in some cases denying that that's even a constitutional principle, but also just disregard the will of the voters, which makes these ballot initiatives so exciting, including in Missouri, where voters overwhelmingly do support abortion access and reproductive freedom. But of course, as we've already heard, there's a lot of education and work to do to make sure people understand what's at stake. So really excited to be here. It's really important that we speak out against Christian nationalism, speak forcefully for abortion access, and fight for these ballot initiatives.
Thank you, Alicia. And next up, speaking to this topic, is Reverend Dr. Marshela Salgado, who's on the board of Progressive Christianity. Welcome, Marshela.
Thank you. Right on board with everything Alicia just said. As we know, the Christian nationalist voice has been very loud, especially on issues regarding abortion and completely disregarding women as a whole and our bodily autonomy. And many women, as we've heard stories coming out especially the past few weeks, women are at risk. Women are medically at risk. And with progressivechristianity.org, we really seek to be a voice and helping people know that not all Christians are pro-life. Not all Christians believe that that we need to focus strictly on the fetus. They use the Bible a lot, and they use metaphors, analogies, scripture verses that were written as poetry are used as actual prophecy and used as the rule of law, and that's very worrisome. So with progressivechristianity.org, we also have a joint partner, an arm of progressivechristianity.org, which is Take Back Christianity, and you can find our resources there on takebacchristianity.org, as well as on Instagram, and that's really an initiative where we hope to reach voters who are undecided, people who might use the Bible and use it, at its word, and really trying to educate people to realize that the Bible should not be the rule of law for our entire nation. And as Alicia said, we shouldn't be using it as a guiding source when there are people of so many different beliefs, but especially as we use this one issue of abortion to guide all of voting. We really need to be aware that that we're ignoring women. We're ignoring women as a whole. We're ignoring women who are medically at risk. And that's just not the Christian thing to do. You know, if we really claim to be, those of us who claim to be Christian, if we claim to follow Jesus, then we should be caring for the marginalized. We should be caring for those at risk. And it's important for our voices to be heard. So that's what we aim to do with progressivechristianity.org. We're constantly that source throughout the year, but especially now with Take Back Christianity, we're hoping that we can help guide voters as they're making decisions in the coming weeks.
Thanks, Marshela. Last time we had our coffee chat, we had Dr. Lauren Bean speaking, and just the firsthand stories of all the doctors that she works with in Ohio, like seeing what the 6-week ban does. We also had somebody from Florida talking about the impact of the 6-week ban, and it's shocking how this affects women's health care, and that's why we want to have this conversation. And next up, we're welcoming Julie Bergman, who's with Band of Sisters, but who also has done an amazing voter. You know, here we're talking about trying to turn out voters and talking up and down the ballot. And Julie, a number of years ago, did an amazing voter initiative and is this year doing Band of Sisters. Welcome, Julie.
Thank you so much. It's really a pleasure and honor to be with all of you. Band of Sisters is really the purpose of it is to echo and to be a mouthpiece as best as we can culturally for all of the work that all of you are doing. So we've put together a social media campaign that will engage artists and musicians and people who are influencers in the cultural space to highlight the link between reproductive freedom and the ballot box in a nonpartisan effort. So we are launching this week. We did a kind of soft launch a week or so ago. And our website is going live this week. And then we're starting to work with various musicians and artists and actors. Some of it's original content that we're creating with them that they will then spread on their social. And then hopefully our partners in the coalition, all of the groups like yourselves and others that are working specifically around reproductive freedom, you know, and the down ballot races and the initiatives on the ballots in each of these states. So, you know, we want to be able to talk about what you guys are doing in these posts. We want you guys to hopefully share what we're doing in these posts. The more noise we can all make together, the better people will understand the link between the things that they care about, especially on this issue, which I don't have to tell all of you. Clearly, this is the issue that's going to make the difference. I can't say it any other way, but we know what we're saying. And that's why we feel safe doing this in a nonpartisan space, because we know that if you care about this issue, there's only one thing to do.
Thank you, Julie. And the Why Do You Vote is also a social action campaign. And before we open up to Q&A and go further, I wanted to just share my screen and share that we are encouraging people to do videos before October 6th, you know, talking about why they vote, why it's so important to put women's health care and bodily autonomy, you know, when they're voting. Think about this when they're voting. And we have $50,000 in prizes, cash prizes for each category. And here's a 1-minute, we have a 1-minute sample video that I like.
I vote for women's choice because we need autonomy over our own bodies. Why do you vote?
I vote because democracy is an important part of the American spirit. Why do you vote?
I vote because the people who came before me made so many sacrifices to make my vote count. And that's why I vote. Why do you vote?
I vote because I want kids to be safe at school. Why do you vote?
I vote because of marriage equality. Why do you vote?
Well, for our environment, to hear our planet, to hear your rights, to hear for everything. So that's the reason I vote. Why do you vote?
I vote because I believe in universal health care for all. Why do you vote?
I vote because I care about marriage equality and people exercising their rights. Why do you vote?
I vote because action is the antidote to despair. Why do you vote?
VOTE.
So, with 41 million Gen Z voters, we wanted to bring this conversation online where they're spending hours a day. So, please encourage people to make a video about why they vote, talking about this issue. And, because they'll reach their friends and circles, so we can reach a lot more people than we might reach just phone banking, and other ways. So, that's why we did this whole Why Do You Vote campaign and the Spark the Vote challenge and these Tuesday coffee chats. This is the educational component. And so please spread the word. We have till Sunday to make videos, so there's still time. They're very short. You saw that one had 9 people in just 1 minute. Doesn't have to take, we want people to still go about their lives, but make social media talking about this issue, especially personal stories. We've had a couple that are really great that have come in. And with that, I also wanted to share again, our spreadsheet where people can keep the latest information. Chris, I want to make sure I have all the correct ballot states that are on there. So I might need to go back. But at this point, I guess I have a first question talking about states. So Florida with the 60% lift is important. Nebraska with the double lift is important. Maybe you could walk us through just again some of that, and then everybody can put questions in the chat. That would be great.
Well, every state is different. So I live in DC, but I was raised in Texas, and Texas and DC are two very different places. So I think and you're looking at every single state, they're going to have specific messaging that is really critical to get those voters out. I think the one common theme across all states has been not having government interference in important medical decisions. Like that is the uniting messaging point for every single state, is like that is really clear to folks. And it's also been, it has been what we have seen from the last 6 states is this is really an issue that transcends party lines. It has been an issue where Republicans, Independents, and Democrats have turned out and voted for these issues. And then some really hard states like Kansas, like Kentucky, Ohio last year. And so every state is unique and in its different way. Like I said before, a majority of them are putting into state constitutions protections for abortions. I think the other ones that are a bit unique, Colorado not only puts an affirmative protection in their state constitution, it also is going to overturn a ban that prevents state medical care from paying for reproductive freedom. So think about Medicaid and low income folks that often don't have access to reproductive care. That's really critical. Another state, New York is unique in the sense that it's, I would say, even a further along and more of a future vision of what we want the evolution of these ballot measures to look at, right? We have the immediate impact of the Dobbs decisions and making sure that we can overturn abortion bans or affirmatively protect abortions. New York is an equal rights amendment style ballot measure. So it's not only thinking about pregnancy and pregnancy outcomes, it's thinking about discrimination, especially for trans and gender nonconforming and the LGBTQ plus community. So that's really what is exciting about, I think both Colorado and in New York, they're sort of going that step further to think about what access and expansion looks like for across the country. So, and then, I think because we talked about Missouri, also the way that it was written could allow for protections for IVF, which is again another really key component of if we're thinking about the full picture of bodily autonomy.
Okay, thank you.
I'd love to jump in here to kind of like build on something you almost mentioned in passing, but that is, how we talk about abortion with our neighbors, with voters, because it's become such a politicized topic. It can be fraught, and people's deeply held like beliefs and values, right, can be tied to that. At Americans United, we've been able to do some great work with our friends at the National Women's Law Center, who have done incredible kind of message like testing and developing resources, particularly about leading with our values. This conversation is framed under bodily autonomy and speaking to that value of how we all deserve the freedom to make our own personal decisions, that politicians shouldn't be interfering with our ability, right, to make decisions about our bodies. That resonates with everyone. And when you get into the weeds on a ballot initiative or a certain law or what have you, it can become trickier. But when you lead with your values, you can make a deeper connection and often kind of cut through some of the like politicization that happens around abortion access. And so I just think that's a really good thing to keep in mind for folks who may be in these states thinking about how to like educate other folks, talk to other folks. I'll dig up that resource because I know we're sharing links in the chat to, again, the National Women's Law Center just has some really great resources that might help you think about your own values and how you might frame these conversations.
Thanks, Alicia. I'm adding that National Women's Law Center here.
I also wanted to just say that we're doing also, Alicia, we're doing a lot of messaging with men because it feels like this is a moment with especially the way the characterization of men in partnership with women was presented during the convention in a way that was kind of refreshing. And we're using similar kind of buzzwords in a way that you're talking about. And the word trust is a big one. That, you know, we trust the women in our lives to make these decisions. And we're making some videos like that with some fathers and daughters and putting people together that way for the very reason that you say, which is that how we communicate about this has expanded. And we're trying to kind of feed off of that.
Thank you, Julie. I can't wait to see your videos. We can always add them here to this. Let's add, do you have the website to add here to the spreadsheet and to share with everyone? Yes, okay. And then, oh, somebody, let's see. I saw a hand up.
It's me.
Oh, Michelle.
Hi, good morning. I was a minute late, so perhaps you all touched on this. The ruling out of Georgia yesterday, Judge McBurney, did you guys speak about this already? I'm wondering, so I'm sure everyone saw this blistering opinion affirming a woman's right to not be an incubator. I mean, his language was just stunning. And I'm wondering, I mean, I expect that that's going to be challenged and go up to the court because he said some very explicit things that challenge the Dobbs ruling. Does anybody have thoughts about this, or if that opinion can be used in the voter outreach of the next few weeks? Any plans among your organizations to sort of maximize that, you know, incredibly wonderful ruling? Thoughts? All right. Well, that'll, you know, it'll be, I mean, I'm sure it will get challenged. I'm hoping that we can amplify that beyond just the news cycle of a couple days that it'll get.
Yeah, I mean, I think the one thing I was going to add is, you know, to build off of Alicia is the power of storytelling. And I have seen, so I am a Latina immigrant, and this power of storytelling to destigmatize has been really important, like really critical in these states. You know, listening to my like tias and abuelas tell their own stories has been like really impactful. And as like my generation has been more willing to tell my own story, that has sort of opened for generations that may have not had the opportunity to speak so openly about reproductive care and their own abortion stories at it. So I think that's connected, Michelle, is sort of like how we see the impact of these abortion bans when you tie it to a story and a person that really has a huge impact. I mean, that's what people want to hear is like how this is going, how this is impacting the people that I love and the people that I care about. And that is actually how we shift mindset and narrative.
I have a question though about that because I was reading a poll yesterday that I didn't understand, and I was trying to figure out like how one would message to like veer in a different direction, which is that in the Latino community, this was Steve Kornacki on MSNBC, right? The older generation of women are much more supportive of reproductive freedom. The younger are not. And they were breaking it up by presidential candidate. And I didn't understand that at all. Do you have any insight into that?
I mean, I guess I can just tell you from like the experience on the ground of like the amount of folks we actually just have helped ghostwrite and or support an op-ed from to Latino leaders because Latinos will play a huge role in 5 of these states that have a huge part of the electorate in Arizona, New York, Colorado, Florida, and I'm forgetting the 5th state. So I mean, polling only gets you so far. And I really think it is a good barometer to understand where you may need to make shifts in focus and like where you may need to emphasize. But at least what we've been hearing from our partners on the ground is these generational conversations together have been really impactful to help shift people's opinions.
Thank you. I'm sharing in the chat also an article about the ruling in Georgia. And we also, during these calls, like to open it up to connect if anybody else wants to share why they came to this call. We've had some people share some very moving stories, or so I do welcome participation. You know, we're supposed to connect, empower, and engage, and I feel like we've been more speaking at versus connecting. So if anybody would like to chime in why this is important to them, how it affects them, that is very welcome. Or we can take more questions. I know sometimes we go shorter, so we don't have to have a long call. We can get back to things too. I know
Holly, I did want to bring up, you and I were talking before we started recording, and I did want to mention with that takebackchristianity.org initiative, how it's really helpful, especially if people have friends or family who tend to, use the Bible as their main resource and use these, religious, ideas to help guide their voting. It's really well put together in a way where we explain, the various issues and some of the facts behind them. So it's very fact driven as well, but it really appeals to those individuals who you might, like I know old friends, from back in the day. I have a really hard time talking to them about why I vote the way I vote, and some of these issues, the way that they're explained has really been helpful to me, and just sharing them on social media has promoted some really good conversations as well. So that's a really good one, especially if you have those people who are undecided and who identify as Christian too, and they're issue by issue. There's 7 different key issues that we identified and put in there, so that would be helpful.
Thank you. Yeah, let's put that in to the chat and to the shared document. Yeah, I know I've been very hesitant to talk to a few family members on this topic because I know like they are in the mind, all of the issues in our campaign have over 70% support. And it's interesting with the social media, you see the very vocal minority who is coming out and really speaking up, yet they are in the minority. So it's, it's great to see that this is a bridging issue, but how to have bridging conversations with some of the more extreme folks is important. I don't know if there's any, like, how do you best start a conversation with somebody? That would be so useful. I know, like, I just even get all nervous even trying to have this conversation with certain people. Um, and it was interesting because I did have this conversation with one person who I thought was very much on, just it's the opposite. And I was surprised how their views had changed in the last 10 years. So it was interesting. I don't know if it's because of we're hearing the horror stories of how this affects women's life. I mean, when you're almost dying or are dying because of medical care not being provided because people are afraid of being sued, and thinking about the entire medical staff that's in the room and when these choices are being made and the liability. Or is it, what's the best way to start this conversation with somebody that you're little nervous about having or online? Like, what's the best way to combat the people who are just very one note and trying to open up their hearts? Because, like, the whole point of social media with storytelling is opening people's hearts and minds. And I see like little short films can do that so beautifully, but sometimes a conversation can just be two walls.
Well, I think going back to the issue of trust, that you trust other women and everyone to be able to make decisions, their own decisions about what happens to their bodies, rather than it being something to do with government, just like Alicia's saying. It's if you start by empowering somebody, knowing that you trust them to make their own decisions, why don't we trust every woman to make her own decision and make that separation, between the government that making your decision for you? Like, how is that okay in any way? And personalize it. Like, would you want some stranger coming up to you and saying, you're not allowed to do that? Like you right outside the doctor's office or something. And this, I feel like it makes me so crazy because I went through this in the 60s, and going to rallies, and people were dying by self-aborting methods, and it was horrible. And everybody came to realize all the horrors, and everything changed, and now we're back in that same place.
Yeah.
But young people don't know what that was like, so I guess everybody has to be re-educated again.
Oh, Ty, yes.
Hi, Holly, and Michelle. Nice to see you again. I was born and raised in Utah, so I was surrounded by Mormons. I'm half Mormon. My dad was, my mom wasn't, and I wanted nothing to do with religion at all. It just like didn't make any sense to me. I'd rather go chase lizards and go water skiing. And then I moved to California and got real spiritual and got involved in the whole New Age thing, and have been in that. I'm a hypnotherapist and a futurist. And in looking at the future, I have a daughter and two, now 3-year-old granddaughters. And so I'm really I want the future to be good for me, but for them, I want a much better world. And I used to freak out a lot because I was looking at the future and saying, as long as religion is in control of the world, we're going to have suffering and struggling, because religions teach you that you have to suffer. And I'm a hypnotherapist, so I know how deeply that goes. into me and every one of my clients. And so I was upset about that, trying to visualize a beautiful future, and at the same time realizing that most of the world is religious and they're incompatible in the current form, or particularly then. And then I read an article in Time magazine that said the participation in religion had gone from like 70 or 80% in our country down to about 50%. And I think it just recently gotten to 49%. And I was like thrilled. I was like so happy. I said, oh my God, there's hope for the future. And I called my daughter and said, Rachel, I have so much hope for the future because this article said that young people are not getting as engaged in strict religion. And I've been worried about this for years. And now I'm really happy because it's literally a massive cultural, taking hundreds and hundreds of years, but it's a cultural shift. And I said, Rachel, I'm so excited about this. And she said, Dad, you idiot. If you had just called me and asked me, I could have told you years ago that me and my friends are not that involved. We just don't care that much about religion. So that gives me great hope. And I'm really thrilled to hear you, Alicia and Nancy, and what you said, Michelle, that way back in college, you recognized Christian nationalism as a serious problem. That blew my mind. And I was thinking about that since we had that conversation like 3 weeks ago. And I was saying, wait a minute, I knew I didn't like religion. I never saw it as the force that you did, to see Christian nationalism where they want to run. It's not government that's the problem. It's if Christianity or any religion ran the government, if Sharia was the law of the government, we'd all be screwed, especially women, because they're all chauvinistic. And so the change that's happening, I see in the big hundreds of years process, is so exciting. And it's so crazy to say and to hear each one of you women speak as the issue of women's autonomous choice is so blatantly obvious, should be an individual choice. And yet it conflicts directly with all of the religious male chauvinists telling people, particularly women, what they should do. It's scary, and it's the thought of 4 more years of Donald Trump. I haven't figured out which country I'll move to, but I'll just pick one. And yet
Mitt Romney, who's also going to move.
What?
Mitt Romney has also said that he's likely going to have to move.
Oh, maybe I'm half Mormon. He's full on Mormon. Maybe
There
we
you
can
go.
the same place. We can be neighbors.
Why I mentioned it.
Thank you, Michelle. Help me with my travel plans.
There you go.
But I'm so excited that the conflict is happening because as you look at it as a women's rights issue, it is so obvious. And then that is, I think, helping to accelerate the breakup of the chauvinism within religion. And I love spirituality. I don't like religion at all, but spirituality, which is somewhat in religion, sort of, I'm so excited about that. So I see this as a massively positive an explosion within the religious control movement. And I'm still mind blown, Michelle, that you saw back in college the Christian nationalism is and wrote a paper about the influence.
Right. I mean, in fairness, I was a religion major, so I was looking at pretty closely, and I have to say it blew my mind at the beginning of this call, the ease with which everyone recognizes Christian nationalism. I mean, everyone spoke about it. That would not have been possible even 5 years ago. And I think it's important also to look at the animating philosophy of Christian nationalism is to get women out of the public square, to remove them altogether. Obviously, reproductive rights is a great way to do this, but we saw it also in the legislation that the Republicans were trying to get through the House just in the last couple of weeks, that would have mandated that you had to have your birth certificate and your current name had to match. Were people all aware of this? So that what that does is remove married women, right? Make it absolutely, so it's another barrier for women. And this is, an expressed pillar of their philosophy, that they don't want women around at all. So recognizing that, and perhaps, marrying that type of legislation, which with all of the anti-choice legislation and rulings. It really, separates. It's hard for them not to be confronted with the fact that their true goal is just to silence women. That's something that I think people are really beginning to see. So that heralds a cultural shift as well.
Massive. And I read I had never even heard the term Christian nationalism till like maybe 9 or 12, 10, 11 months ago or something like that. And then when I started looking into what it is, oh my God, it was so shocking. And I found a study where they asked what percentage of the population considered themselves Christian nationalists, and it was about 11%. But then when they took, like you said, Michelle, the beliefs, when they asked people who held those beliefs, about 30% of our population in our country holds those Christian nationalist beliefs that put down women and put Christianity into God or into politics.
Right.
So it's about 30% of the population, and that's Trump's primary base. 33% of his base come direct, and he's the worst Christian there could ever be. He's the worst human being they could ever be. But 30%, because it serves and they're so hypocritical, it serves their aims. And it's like 30% of the population. I wouldn't have believed that about the country that I live in, but it's true.
Right.
And I was so happy to hear everyone openly discussing that, particularly even Christians. Alicia, like you, and
Marshela.
Marshela. Yes.
Yeah, it's interesting because I've traveled quite a bit and spent time in other countries where I was trying to understand what things were political, what were cultural, and what were religious. And it's very hard to sometimes understand when you travel to countries where there isn't the separation of church and state. Is it cultural? Is it political? Or is it religious? And I think that would be, when we're talking about this, can, in any religion, that can be the case. And when you're going with extremes.
I wanted to say a little bit, because a lot of things have sort of come up, and I wanted to speak a little bit to, I work with young people across the country who care really deeply about combating Christian nationalism, about fighting for abortion access and queer rights and public education, and so many of the issues that have come up today and are connected, whether or not they've come up or not. And these young people, as well as our wider work as Americans United, is folks who are Christian, are Muslim, Hindu, atheist, humanist, people with a wide variety of religious and non-religious beliefs and identity, who all agree that church-state separation protects all of us, and that the other issues like of bodily autonomy are fundamentally connected to that. And so I just think like it's so important to know that like young people of very diverse beliefs see this. Unfortunately, abortion is illegal in much of the country now. We don't even have to look to the past to see tragic harm and deaths caused by these bans. And so the urgency is there. Like the education is still necessary to understand, like coming back full circle, like what exactly these ballot initiatives say, why our votes matter, and how it differs across different states. So appreciate the work that the ballot initiative is doing and everybody's doing.
And do you see, Alicia, do you see the young people do you see their interest growing and their discussion, particularly with abortion as a massive trigger and a catalyst? Do you see their conversations increasing and more young people opening up to, and I love that you said that the church-state separation protects everyone, and phrased it that way in my own brain. That's fantastic.
Right. Yeah, the Dobbs decision was a huge turning point for many people in this country, of course, but including young people. I talk to young people all the time who were in high school or maybe college when that decision happened. And it was just this huge turning points for them and their understanding of the issue, of their sort of political awakening, of of the need to fight. Of course, like generations and generations of young people have been fighting for abortion access, but sort of in our current times, that is in some ways kind of a turning point and a aha moment or a political awakening for many of the young people that I hear from or that I work with.
And is that leading, is the abortion fight leading to an examination of religious nationalism, Christian nationalism, the separation of church and state? Does it take, or is it just about abortion, or does it expand into the real underlying issue?
Yeah. It's drawing those connections. Like book bans are a huge awakening for a lot of people in this moment of these fights that in libraries and in public schools and in school districts, right, where it feels like this reversion of these culture wars over what books young people are able to read. Connecting all these issues, a lot of young people are motivated around the fight for trans rights and LGBTQ rights broadly, the threat to marriage equality, that was hinted at in the Dobbs minority agreement. I'm not the lawyer, so anyways, Clarence Thomas's writing in that decision. And what we see, Christian nationalist organizations fighting for, like Project 2025, this promise to roll back so many of the rights that young people care about, and all of us care about under a future conservative administration. So yeah, it's like connecting those dots and saying, oh yeah, like Christian nationalists want to impose this really broad vision of a conservative world, a world where our rights are restricted in so many ways, our access to information and education. And so to combat that, we have to combat with a vision of true autonomy and access to education, right? A true pluralistic democracy where all of us get to participate fully in the vote and in access to services and access to education and everywhere that we show up in our lives.
Alicia, I love that you brought it back to this overlapping. In fact, that's why we follow these 7 issues and Money Out Voters In. Michelle co-founded this, and I've worked closely with her on this, is getting big money out of politics and how like they're all connected. Like women's rights affects healthcare, like the big money, Leonard Leo, who was put billions and like got the Supreme Court. It's, the Federalist Society, it's all connected. So I actually would love Chris to share a little bit more about the ballot initiative. So Money Out Voters In passed Prop 59, which was the Overturned Citizens United Act for California, because they are all linked, and we often siphon and just talk in silos when we need to look at it all and work together. So
I mean, connecting the dots is so critically important because people aren't just going to naturally go there. So you sort of have to paint that picture. And I think the last thing Alicia said around the vision for the future, that is actually probably the most motivating factor for all of us, right? It's not just about what we're against, but really if you're going to motivate people to take action, especially around voting and beyond that, it is painting that picture of the future vision. I think that is why ballot measures have just become such this resource for people to paint a different story and tell a different story about the future they want for their communities, whether it's reproductive freedom, whether it's wages and benefits, whether it's making sure that workers can unionize. Like I always say that ballot measures are our opportunity to create love letters to our people, because it really gives us the power and the agency to put the things that we care about on the ballot. And I think because we have had we are in such a politicized moment right now, especially in government, having that ballot measures have sort of been this ability for us to break through and really give people hope and inspiration of what's possible. And I think that's why you're seeing people like we've had such high signature gathering numbers this year for a lot of the reproductive freedom ballot measures, is because people are like motivated. They're like, yes, I want these abortion bans. They don't speak for us and they don't speak for me and my community. But it's also to what you just said, Holly, too. It is because ballot measures are a form of democracy, that means it is also beholden to some of the same rules and regulations that our larger democracy. And from our perspective at BISC, the courts absolutely matter. We have saw so many lawsuits filed against these ballot measures this year to question the signature gathering, to question the language, or we got bad rulings on some language, like in Arizona and in Florida. And then the huge influence of money in politics across all of the whole electoral process, right? From candidates, ballot measures themselves, too. So, one of the lines that I've been saying is the fight for reproductive freedom is the fight for our democracy too. And we have to stop looking at these issues in their silos. That actually, I look at reproductive freedom as a democracy issue, as an economic justice issue, as a climate issue. It's a criminal justice issue as well. If you think about how it has been weaponized, people are being criminalized right now. It really behooves us to tell this larger picture and connect those dots for people. And one thing that Alicia said that everybody's got to remember: if you start any conversation, start with values. That is what connects us as human beings, are our values. And that is actually how we can get through those tougher conversations, like freedom, honesty, truth, integrity. These are really big values for us. If you think about the marriage equality fight, love is love, love, the freedom to love it's such a core American value. Freedom itself is that is where we can actually shift conversations, is speaking from those values.
And you asked Holly about starting conversation. You mentioned it. Is it Chris who was just speaking?
Yeah.
Yes. You mentioned future vision, and I'm a hypnotherapist, as I said, and for over 35 years something. My work is called future visioning because I had to save my own life from a life-threatening illness and a suicidal depression 40 years ago. And I pulled myself out of both of those by looking at and working with my future. And I found out it's life and death important. In the Bible, it says, without vision, the people perish. Literally, you don't have vision, you die. I almost did twice. It's actually more than that. But so I started working with the future, and it's the answer. Holly, you asked how to start conversations. What I found is if you talk about the future that we want and talk with someone else about the future they want, I do a lot of work with couples, and in a couple, if they have different visions of the future, they might as well just divorce now and get it over with, or consolidate the vision of the future. The same thing is true of the world. And I shared this once many weeks ago in this. So I've studied the future for 30, 40 years. I'm the only therapist in the world that my whole work is focusing on working with the future. It comes from u.gov, and it's how various countries, this is the US here, Sweden, advanced countries, how many people in the country feel excited about the future, as opposed to how many think the world is stuck or getting worse. So the red is stuck or getting worse in all the advanced countries in the world. And the 6% here are the people in the country who actually feel like the future is getting better for the world. In that situation, you can't win the game. It's like having a Super Bowl team. I have a whole analogy that I create, a Super Bowl team where only one player thinks they can win the game. That team is not going to play well. And this is the human race as of 2017 something. It's probably gotten worse since then because of COVID and the insanity and Trump and all that stuff. But talking about the future, I'm now feeling hopeful. And particularly with each one of you, I feel more hopeful. And my daughter's married to a woman, and then my two granddaughters are their children through IVF. And I felt comfortable with that and cool with that. And then when all this craziness happened, and literally the right to be married to a woman was on the chopping block. And I said, oh my God, I'm already engaged in this stuff, but it's worse than I think. And we have to win the game. We have to change this. If we flip this so that 90% of the people could see a bright future, we would all have more fun. So let's do that
Yeah,
for all of us. Oh, go ahead, Dennis.
Yeah, you're making me want to share the heart of our campaign, which to show how much we all agree on all these. Most
yes.
Americans, 71% support marriage equality, 72% of women should make decisions about her own body, etc. The mainstream media likes to divide us, which is why we're trying to reach young people on social media, bypass that conversation. You know, young people are getting their news from social media, not the mainstream. So we can stop having this dividing conversation. And when we talk about elections, most people don't vote for candidates. So talking about our future, you know, it's only at 13% and 10% that people are voting because of a candidate. So if we talk, you know, let's go out there, talk about this shared future, this country we all believe in and agree, you know, we can really.
And what you just showed me, what you just showed there, Holly, that is really profound. I looked at the 83% believe in gun background
Sensible
checks,
gun laws. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
which is sensible gun laws, which is so obvious. So what I just saw right there was 83% want that and 71%, 75%, but it's not happening. And it's because of this. Even if 83% feel like we should have sensible gun laws and reasonable laws about everything, but if you don't believe that the world is really going to ever work, which sadly comes from religion, there's always doom and gloom. It's always the disaster. We're always headed for Armageddon in every religion. It's the future is ultimately bleak. If you're headed for, if you like what I explain to my clients, if you're riding on the Titanic, it doesn't matter what you do. You can have a great massage. You can have a great meditation. You won't even bother voting because you feel like you're riding on the Titanic and it's not going to make any. So that's insane that 83% want sensible gun laws, but 94% don't think the world is going to work. That's where the conflict is.
Yeah. Well, we are at the top of the hour, and I really wanted to thank our guest, Chris. You have Ballot Initiative Strategy Center, Alicia, Julie, and Reverend Marshela. I really appreciate everybody taking the time, and I will send out the link to this call will be online so that people can get this information. And I so appreciate everybody coming here today, and I look forward to working together to co-create this future that we
beautiful future
clearly all believe in. Thank you, everyone.
Thank
Thanks,
you so
Holly.
much.
Thanks, Michelle.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.